Well, welcome everybody to beautiful Cantigny Park. And of course, thank you so much for choosing to spend your evening with us here at the park tonight. We're super excited to bring this presentation to you tonight, but as usual, my name is Laura. I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here for the 1st Division Museum. And you know I always like to start this program by telling you what's coming up first. So first and foremost, I want to remind everybody about our next upcoming Date with History presentation, which is on Thursday, November 3rd, right here at LJ's at 7:00 p.m. And that presentation is very exciting because it is going to be the kickoff to our 80th commemoration of the 80th anniversary of Operation Torch. So that presentation is going to be an examination of the landing operations and several key leaders and hard-fought battles, and will bring some special attention, of course, to the 1st Infantry Division, United States Army. That presentation will be done by Dr. David Ulbrich, the Associate Dean of the Arts and Sciences Division at Norwich University. We hope you'll join us. After that, we're going to have not just one Date with History for you next month, we're going to bring you two because it's the kickoff to the 80th anniversary of Torch. So why not have two Date with Histories, right? So after that one, that should be a Tuesday, November 15th, we're going to be joined by Jessica Wazak, one of our staff members at the 1st Division Museum, and she's going to be sharing with us the story of the nurses of Operation Torch, particularly the 128th Evacuation Hospital. And again, that is going to be done by our museum specialist, Jessica Wazak. And of course, we're going to backtrack just a little bit because we know that everybody in the audience tonight loves history. And so if you'd like to learn a little bit more about something that's not military history related, I'd like to encourage you to attend our Headlines from History on Thursday, October 27th. That one is going to be particularly exciting because this year we are celebrating the 175th anniversary of the Chicago Tribune. So that presentation will be done by Cantigny employee Jeff Anderson, and he's going to take a look back at some of the most famous headlines in the Chicago Tribune's first century, revealing not only the headline-making news that was on the cover of the Tribune, but how the Tribune itself played a significant role in making the news. And we hope you'll join us for that presentation. But let's get on to this evening's topic. And before I have him up here, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker tonight. His name is Javier Martinez. Javier is a Marine Corps veteran, having earned his commission through the NROTC program at Notre Dame. For the last 15 years, he has taught U.S. history, AP U.S. history, and military history at Kalen High School in King County. Javier is also a national trainer for the Congressional Medal of Honor Society's Character Development Program, or CDP, which uses the stories of our nation's Medal of Honor recipients to teach youth about what it means to live the core values of courage, commitment, citizenship, sacrifice, integrity, and patriotism. The CDP is used in schools across the country in classrooms ranging from elementary to high school. Most recently, he has joined the programs and education team at Cantigny Park. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Javier Martinez.
Tonight, I've been told I have to stand as close as I can to this because there's a camera on me, so if I start to drift, somebody pull me back. So before we even start today's talk about the history of the medal, just kind of you don't have to put your hand in the air, but just kind of think about where you're at on this scale of no one's a zero because you're here. So you obviously know something about the medal. But kind of just think, are you a novice? You've heard of the medal, you're not quite sure what it means. Because if you do a Google search, video game comes up. That's one of the top hits. Or are you maybe somewhere along you've heard of it, you know a little bit about it, you've read about it, or are you a 5 and maybe I should sit down and give you the clicker and I'll enjoy your presentation. So just think about where you're at on this. My goal is when you walk out of here an hour from now, maybe you moved up 0.5, maybe even 1 maybe, and learn a little bit something about the medal today.
The Medal of Honor, the United States' highest award for valor in combat. Fewer than 3,600 of the over 41 million who have served in the armed forces of the United States have been honored to wear the medal for actions above and beyond the call of duty. It embodies the sacrifices of all our service members, the history of our armed forces, in the values that have shaped the nation over the centuries: courage, commitment, integrity, sacrifice, citizenship, and patriotism. Early in the Civil War, the Union suffered some humiliating defeats, and the military needed a way to maintain morale and make an example of those who performed their duties heroically. So, legislation was introduced for a Valor Award in the Navy, and on December 21st, 1861, the Navy Medal of Honor was born. Similar legislation was introduced for the Army 2 months later, and it was signed into law on July 12, 1862. The design of the medal may have changed over time, but it has always taken cues from the purpose, strength, and bravery of the individuals who wear it. Today, the Navy's Medal of Honor features the initial Civil War design of Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom and war, representing the United States. She is shown fighting discord, the embodiment of the nation's enemies. The Army's design has a simple profile of Minerva's head surrounded by a green wreath of laurel and oak leaves, representing victory and strength. The iconic light blue ribbon with 13 white stars, now used by all the branches of the service, was first adopted by the Army in 1904. The U.S. Air Force's Medal of Honor keeps the laurel and oak leaves of the Army Medal, but Minerva's head is replaced with a profile of Lady Liberty. During the last half of the 19th century and through the 20th century, the Medal of Honor's requirements were refined and cemented by Congress and the military. As a result, each Medal of Honor recommendation undergoes a scrupulous examination and documentation process under a deadline, ensuring that evidence is obtained in an expedient manner and that valorous actions are quickly recognized and celebrated. Although medals were initially shunned by the Founding Fathers as the trappings of monarchy, the Medal of Honor embodies the spirit of the Revolution, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. For those service members who have received the medal, it is a recognition from their country that we honor their selfless, extraordinary heroism and risk of life for us on the battlefield. And for the average citizen, it is a reminder of the courage, commitment, integrity, sacrifice, citizenship, and patriotism that has gone into protecting and providing for our nation and our freedom.
So that's just a quick primer on the medals. We're going to kind of delve in a little deeper into some of these. So it's the highest award we give for valor in our military. It is given for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity. So if you need a vocabulary lesson, go home and look those up. Words we don't really use in normal lexicon. It's got to be submitted by peers who witnessed the action and then validated by other eyewitness accounts. And I'll talk a little bit later why that's important to bring out. And this is key. The awardees are not winners. They do not refer to themselves as winners. They will correct you if you do. They are recipients. They will tell you to a person they did not go out that day to win anything. And they would give the medal back if it would bring back their friends. So we refer to them as recipients and not winners, which is difficult in today's environment, today's culture, to tell someone, no, you're not a winner. You're a recipient. So as you heard in the video, it was signed into law by President Lincoln in 1861 for the reasons you heard. I find it kind of unique that a land-based state, Iowa, recommended the medal for the Navy, while Massachusetts, a coastal state, was the genesis of the Army's medal. first medal was awarded. First medal was awarded March 25th of 1863, and that has become known as Medal of Honor Day. It is celebrated every year as Medal of Honor Day. Some other important dates, 1916, 1917, something called the Purge, and we'll talk about that. Some medals were actually taken back. They were rescinded. And then the Air Force Medal came along in 1956 for the simple reason is we did not have an Air Force officially until 1947. We had the Army Air Corps. So they did not have their own medal design until after the creation of the Air Force. Sure. No, we're good. All right, so what is this purge I mentioned? There's no criteria originally for awarding the medal. And I'll show you one of the shortest citations here in a little bit. Civil War, over 1,500 medals are awarded for the Civil War. Things as simple as capturing a flag. People could nominate themselves for the Medal of Honor, and many did. So there was not a really tight criteria until the turn of the century. After Little Bighorn, the Battle of Little Bighorn, a lot of soldiers did a lot of heroic things, and their commanders recommended them for the Medal of Honor. It was the only award we had for valor. So if you're going to give something, you were going to give the Medal of Honor. The Army thought maybe they were being given too freely, so they started tightening up the criteria. They said certainly a lot of soldiers have done valorous things, but was it above and beyond the call of duty? Was it something that was not expected of them, did not fall in the normal criteria of what they should do as a soldier? So it's after Little Bighorn, end of the 1800s, we start seeing some criteria come out. President McKinley orders a review. He wants to make sure that you can no longer self-nominate, and as you see up there, we need eyewitnesses. We need people who saw what happened, who will testify under oath that that's what happened. So McKinley's administration and then Roosevelt's administration after him will continue to tighten the criteria. Congress will get involved right at the eve of our involvement in World War I. Congress will pass a bill that will award every Medal of Honor recipient $10 a month pension for the rest of their life once they turn 65 years old. So now money's involved. So now Congress wants some accountability. So the Army is ordered to put together a review board. So in 1917, a group of Army generals will sit down and they are ordered by the Department of Defense to review every Medal of Honor that has been awarded up to that point. Out of that, we get what is the modern criteria. You have to be a member of the U.S. military. You can be serving with a foreign force. As long as you are a member of the U.S. military, serving with an allied nation, that's okay, but you have to be in the military. And it has to be for combat. There has to be valor in combat, not just simply you did a good job. Well, as they go through reviewing these, they're going to rescind or take back 911 medals. The lion's share of those are the 27th Regiment from Maine, who were all awarded the Medal of Honor for the valorous act of reenlistment. Nowadays, they get bonuses. Back then, they gave them the Medal of Honor. You had President Lincoln's funeral guards were all awarded the Medal of Honor. And you can see the different numbers up here. All of those were rescinded, were taken back. And we'll revisit this story in a little bit. So we're starting to see the medal criteria tighten up as we turn the century into the beginning of the 20th century. Dr. Mary Walker, a female, is wearing the medal. We'll talk about what happened to her medal and how she got it and why it was rescinded. I keep calling it the Medal of Honor. And this is the biggest argument that you'll hear come out amongst military people or historians or just amateur historians. Is it the Medal of Honor or is it the Congressional Medal of Honor? And there are so many knockdown, drag-out arguments about this. It is the Medal of Honor. Congress awards it, but it is a military award. Congress basically signs off on the recommendation from the Department of Defense. But I can see where the confusion comes in because this is a Medal of Honor certificate citation, World War I. Now, if the audience can see it, but this official government document says the Congressional Medal of Honor for valor. So the confusion has started within the ranks, within the halls of Congress and the government. But today the recipients will tell you it is the Medal of Honor. It is not the Congressional Medal of Honor. And other confusions tossed in because Congressional Medal of Honor Society. And I'll explain that as we get throughout the program. So the medal. We start with the Navy. There's the original Navy medal, 1863. The Navy will change the design of their medal after the Army does. And in 1913, the Navy medal will adopt the light blue ribbon with the 13 stars representing the 13 colonies. And then in 1919, the Navy decides they want a second medal. Shipboard life, life on the seas, is inherently dangerous. Some sailors are performing acts of heroism that are not in combat. They're saving a shipmate from drowning. They're fighting a fire aboard a ship. If you're ever in the Navy, a shipboard fire is a serious thing. So the Navy will come out with what comes to be known as the Tiffany Cross. They will design it. That will be for valorous acts in combat. The original design, the one in the middle, will be given still, but for non-combat actions during dangerous times aboard a ship. From the very beginning, it goes awry. The Navy starts awarding the Tiffany Cross Medal for non-combat actions. They get it all confused. The Tiffany Medal is only awarded, I believe, to 23 individuals, and it will go away at the beginning of World War II. As you can see, the Army Medal and the Navy Medal look very much alike as far as the ribbon goes. The Army replaced the anchor that the Navy has on theirs with the eagle and cross cannons. And then 1896, the Army will change the ribbon on their medal, and I'll explain why here in a little bit. And then, as we're going into the turn of the century, the Army will adopt the light blue ribbon. They will no longer use the Navy medal, and they will design their own medal. Same symbolism. You have Minerva there. You have Minerva there as a profile view. You have the laurels. You still have the eagle, but now you have the light blue ribbon. So why all the changes? That's why. The original medal for the Army, for the Navy, and then the Grand Army of the Republic, a fraternal organization that comes about after the Civil War. Any soldier who served in the Union Army could join this fraternal organization, much like the American Legion, like the Marine Corps League, like the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And by joining, they would be given this badge that looks really, really similar to the Medals of Honor. So there was confusion. The Army decided to change their design, to change the ribbon here first, and then eventually to this. The Navy will adopt it. So the medal has gone through some transformations. The Air Force comes along. 1947 becomes a separate service within the military, the Department of Defense. They have approval for their design. In Korea, there will be 4 medals awarded, but the design hadn't been approved yet. So those 4 airmen, pilots, I believe, will all receive the Army medal because Army Air Corps is what they would have gotten World War II. 1965, the medal's been approved, and we'll see the first award of this medal to an Air Forceman. So today, these are the 3 medals. They are all called the Medal of Honor, but they are 3 different designs. You have your Army, your Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and your Air Force. Now, I know we've got some veterans in the group, so we all know we like kind of ribbing each other a little bit. So this is not me speaking, this is recipients speaking. I had one recipient tell me that he asked his Air Force buddy, he said, actually the Air Force guy said, you know what? Our medal's larger because we're better. Because it is. These are to scale. And the Army recipient retorted very quickly, yours is that big because you need a place in the back to put the batteries for the lights to flash. So there's always this good-natured ribbing back and forth. The Coast Guard does have an approved design. If a Coast Guardman is awarded a Medal of Honor from this day forward, they will receive the Coast Guard design. We only have one Coast Guardman who's received the medal, and we'll talk about him in a minute, and he received the Navy medal. So, modern criteria after the purge. And I won't read all of this, you all can read, but basically it says that you need to do something above and beyond the call of duty to be considered for this award. It goes through an exhaustive process. Like any other personal decoration in the military, it can be stopped at any point in the chain of command, it can be downgraded, or it can be totally just stopped and said, nope, really doesn't deserve any sort of special recognition. So it's like every other award, but it goes to a much higher level of scrutiny. Those two eyewitnesses, before it had to be obviously you or I. We're in the age of technology. We have awarded medals based on the eyewitness accounts of drones. We're talking, we're in the 21st century. The medal has to be recommended within 3 years of the action and actually presented within 5 years of the action, unless Congress passes a bill, and what they usually do is they attach it to another bill. Congress passes a bill waiving those requirements. So you will see, we just had 4 medals awarded within the last year to Vietnam veterans. 1 posthumously, 3 are still living. For actions during Vietnam, Congress had to basically vote on saying, okay, we'll dispense with those requirements in this case, but each time they have to do that. There are 3,534 medals that have been awarded. There are 3,515 recipients, only 65 still with us. Majority of those are Vietnam-era vets. This is them recently, not all of them, at the Medal of Honor Convention in Knoxville, Tennessee, a couple weeks ago. The young people up front, these are recipients of an award that the Medal of Honor recipients give to citizens. 18.5% of all the awards going back to the Civil War are posthumous, and the number there for World War II is telling. World War II and on, over 50% of the medals cost the individual their life. So it kind of sets home how rare this medal is and how difficult, how important it is. The breakdown enlisted and officers is there. When the Navy first came out with this award, it was not for officers. This was for enlisted Navy and Marine Corps personnel. It took 50 years before the Navy agreed to consider officers for it. The Army considered both enlisted and officers from the very beginning. This is a slide from our website, kind of gives you just a quick breakdown. Again, you can see most of the medals were for the Civil War era, because again, that was the only award we had to give. Breakdown by branch of service. Again, no surprise here, the Army is our largest branch. They obviously, and again, since the Civil War had the highest number of medals awarded, it makes sense that the Army has the propensity of the medals. And like I said, there is 1 Coast Guard medal. I won't delve too much here, but yes, it is illegal. It's illegal to gain any sort of financial benefit or intangible benefit from claiming you are a Medal of Honor recipient. It is illegal to sell the medal. It is illegal to make a facsimile of the medal and sell it. Congress passed a law. On the website, the Congressional Medal of Honor website, you will see that they tell you where the medal is accredited to. This one throws people for a loop sometimes, because if we think today, especially those who are veterans, a lot of our bases are in the South. The southern states tend to have a higher number of enlistments percentage-wise by population. But if you think about when the medal was created, no one from the Confederate States was awarded the Medal of Honor. So the highest numbers are coming, again, that Civil War number skews the data. Illinois, we have 208. A couple of them local here, nearby. There's a school in Wheaton that has an alumni who's a Medal of Honor recipient, unfortunately posthumously. Do you have to be a citizen? You do not. We have many people in our armed forces who are not citizens of this country. They enlist without citizenship. They may get it later. This gentleman here, Al Rascon, Vietnam medic, he was born in Chihuahua, Mexico. He eventually became a citizen, but you do not have to be a citizen to be awarded the medal. As it says there, 764 foreign-born servicemen have received the Medal of Honor. And I know of one, since I'm from Cuba, I know of one, not me, but there is a Navy captain who was awarded the medal at the turn of the century. He was born in Cuba. I'm assuming just like Senator McCain, his father must have been stationed in Cuba, maybe at Guantanamo Bay. I like to think that our military is probably the best representation of a cross-section of our nation, where veterans don't really look at things like gender and race and ethnicity. We look at, do you do your job? The medal is probably a good representation of that, but we also know that throughout our history, we haven't always done the right thing. There have been medals that should have been awarded that were not awarded for reasons of discrimination of various types. I also like to think that we do the right thing eventually, and we always go back and review. So the military, the Department of Defense will go back periodically and review awards. Was someone awarded a lesser award, should have gotten the Medal of Honor but didn't because of discrimination? Let's make that right. Most recently, there's something called the Valor 24. President Obama awarded 24 Medals of Honor to recipients who had gotten either no award or a lower award because of their race, because of their ethnicity, so that was corrected. Melvin Morris was one of those gentlemen who received the Army's Distinguished Service Cross, was upgraded to a Medal of Honor for actions in Vietnam. A lot of the data I'm giving you is on our website. I'm just taking a screenshot here of that, so if I'm talking too fast or I'm giving you too much information, you can certainly go back and look, and again, I will give you that website at the end of today's presentation. So we'll go through some of these notable recipients fairly quickly. I told you that the first recipient was during the Civil War. It is Jacob Parrott for something known as the Great Locomotive Chase. A group of Union soldiers stole a Confederate locomotive and went on a spree through the South, tearing up telegraph lines and tearing up rail lines. They were the first recipients of the Medal of Honor. And again, March 25th, Medal of Honor Day in honor of that event. Not to leave out any branch of service, the Marine Corps, Corporal Mackey. This is a picture of him long after his service. And I just kind of paraphrased his citation. We have a Navy recipient also during the Civil War, a quartermaster. Don't make fun of the supply folks. And here's our first Air Force recipient of the Air Force Medal. Like I said, 4 members of the Air Force received the Army Medal for valorous actions during the Korean War. But Major Fisher, Bernard Fisher, was the first recipient of the Air Force design. I told you we had one Coast Guardman. Douglas Monroe earned the medal posthumously during the Battle of Guadalcanal in 1942, during a mission with the Marines, trying to evacuate Marines off the beach. He put his landing craft between other landing craft and the shore. He lost his life in that action. To date, he is the only Coast Guard recipient to receive the medal. We've got some father and sons. Theodore Roosevelt Jr., who was with the 1st Division at the start of World War II, later landed on Normandy, which I believe the 4th Division. He will receive the Medal of Honor. And then about 40 years later, his dad will be recognized. This is one of those ones that was issued later. Teddy Roosevelt will receive the medal for his actions in Cuba during the Spanish-American War. We have Arthur MacArthur and his son Douglas MacArthur. These are the only father-son pairs that we have. I told you we'd talk about our only female recipient, Dr. Mary Walker. She volunteered as a surgeon during the Civil War. She wanted a commission as an Army officer, but it's the 1860s. Women are not allowed to be in the military. So Dr. Walker will serve as a volunteer surgeon. She will serve on the battlefield at Antietam and I believe Bull Run. She will be captured by the Confederates, spend several months in a Confederate prison, eventually be traded for a Confederate surgeon. She will be awarded the Medal of Honor by the Army. It was done in recognition of her valorous acts, but also partially because they couldn't give her a commission. They felt this was a way to honor her service. And again, we're talking the Civil War era. This is the only medal we have. We're giving it for a lot of things we would not give it for today, but she certainly did things that today would have earned her the medal. Well, in the Purge, you have to be a member of the military. Dr. Walker was not a member of the military. She was a volunteer surgeon. Her medal will be rescinded after the Purge. 1977, there'll be a review of medals. Dr. Walker will have her medal reinstated. It today is in the Hall of Heroes in the Pentagon. And much to her character, she never gave it back. She was told to give it back. She refused to give it back and pretty much wore it the rest of her life until she passed away. Buffalo Bill Cody, who was one of the Army Scouts, again, not a member of the U.S. military, and the other Scouts will also have their medals reinstated a couple years later. So of the ones that were taken away, some were given back or reinstated. If you've seen the movie Glory, William Carney was the first black recipient of the Medal of Honor, served with distinction with the Massachusetts Regiment that is depicted in the movie Glory. If you've seen the movie, Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman's characters are basically the story of William Carney. Our youngest recipient was 12 years old on his action. He was a drummer. And like I said, that is his citation up there. That is the official citation. Gallantry in 7 days battle and Peninsula Campaign. That is all it said. Citations today are much more formal. Just a couple of others, looking at some other segments of our population. Now, maybe some of you caught the discrepancy. I told you there was 3,534 medals awarded, but only 3,515 awardees. There are 19 double recipients. That no longer happens. Most of them are Navy and Marine Corps personnel who were awarded either for separate actions, in the case of the Navy primarily. The Marines, a lot of them during World War I were awarded an Army medal and a Navy medal, since the Marine Corps was part of the Department of the Navy. Thomas Custer, probably much to his brother's chagrin, Thomas Custer is one of our double recipients, both for actions during the Civil War. And being a Marine myself, I had to toss up Dan Daly up there, who was awarded his medal for actions in the Boxer Rebellion in 1900 in China and during what's called the Banana Wars in Nicaragua. And is supposedly famously to have said, and I hope I don't offend anybody's ears here, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" And off they went. We don't know if he actually said that or not. Military chaplains, who we don't normally associate with combat. 9 chaplains have been awarded the Medal of Honor for valorous acts on the battlefield. One of my favorite stories is Emil Kapan, Army chaplain during Korea. Refused to evacuate, refused to retreat, stayed with his men, was captured, went to a prisoner of war camp. In the camp, tended to the men's spiritual needs, gave them what they needed, eventually passed away in the camp, unfortunately. When the war ended, the North Koreans repatriated over 800 sets of human remains. We didn't know Father Kapoon was in there. We didn't know which was which. 2013, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, and just recently, within the last 5 years, his remains were positively identified. They were brought home to his parish in Pilsen, Kansas. His body is in Wichita, Kansas. His medal is at his little parish, little tiny town north of Wichita. I would encourage you to look up all of these people. So, I've been talking about the Medal of Honor now for 30 minutes, but we're doing it at the Army's 1st Division Museum. So there's got to be a connection somehow. The medal is fantastic. We should talk about it anyway, but we need to talk about the 1st Division as well because this is their museum here just across the way. So the 1st Division is very well represented in the Medal of Honor history, especially considering most of the medals were awarded for Civil War. 1st Division doesn't come into being until 1916, basically World War I. We have 5 recipients from World War I, 17 from the Second World War, 13 in Vietnam. A unique story, Airman, 1st class. That's Air Force. He was in action with the Army's 1st Division in Vietnam. He was a medevac corpsman or medic, had himself lowered down onto the battlefield because he knew he could serve the guys down there better than waiting for them to be brought up into the helicopter and flown off. He fought in the battle while he was also tending to wounded soldiers from the 1st Division. The 1st Division claims him as one of theirs. And there was a movie that came out called The Last Full Measure, which is a decent Hollywood rendition of his story. Not totally accurate, but gives you a good education on him. And on the global war on terror, we have 2 recipients from the 1st Division. One of them posthumous, and Ross McGinnis here. And Staff Sergeant David Bellavia received his a few years ago for actions in Iraq. Samuel Parker, we actually have his medal here. It's part of our collection. We're going to have you come up and take a look at some medals at the end of the program. This is Pitzenberger. World War II, D-Day, John Pinder, Staff Sergeant Bellavia, Ross McGinnis, also Iraq. Stryker, I believe he is, I think he was I want to say specialist. The Army Stryker fighting vehicle is named after him, Vietnam. Walt Ehlers, World War II, also on a couple days after D-Day. And Johnny Monteith, unfortunately his was posthumous. And there are others. We have another connection which is unique, and I've been working for the Medal of Honor Society for 6 years now. And I did not know this story. The folks at the museum kind of made me aware of this. The very first Medal of Honor action actually occurred the 13th of February of 1861. The Army Medal hadn't even been approved yet. Army Medal doesn't get approved, I believe, until I think it said April or May of 1861. Actually, 62. In the Arizona Territory, while the Civil War is going on, or at least at the eve of it, Dr. Bernard Irwin is an Army surgeon who will lead a rescue mission to rescue a group of cavalrymen being held by Native Americans in the Arizona Territory. His medal will be presented almost 30 years later. That's one of those reviews looked at. His medal will be presented. But the neat connection is he is the father-in-law of Robert McCormick, the gentleman whose property we are now standing on. So there's a really neat connection with Cantigny, this whole property, the McCormick family. This is his first wife's father. Some other recipients there. The 1st Division Museum, which if you haven't visited, you got to take the day and come out and see us. We are proud to be the custodians of 7 medals. 4 of them are on display, as you see there, and 3 of them are in our collections. 2 of those our collection staff was kind enough to bring out, and again, we'll give you an opportunity to come up and talk to them about it at the end of the show. And again, I think it's important to mention their names. Ross McGinnis, we have his medal. I believe this is, I want to say this is Barrett. Stryker, Parker, his medal is here. Hibbs, and I believe this, I'm sorry, this is Collier, this is Barrett. We do not have a picture for Henry Schroeder, but we have his medal. So you'll be able to see one of the older medals. And again, just to kind of give homage to some of the 1st Division soldiers who have won or been awarded this prestigious medal. Captain Bobby Brown, World War II. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Parker, Vietnam. This is Mr. Parker here, Lieutenant Parker getting his medal. I'm sorry, it's Charles Rogers. David Bellavia. This is John Pinder's father. John Pinder lost his life in the action that earned him the medal on D-Day. This again is Walt Ehlers. And this is Candelario Garcia, a tunnel rat with the 1st Division during the Vietnam War. We have a display on him in the lobby of our museum. He passed away. He was one of those medals of the Valor 24 that President Obama awarded. He had passed away already at this point from natural causes. His medal was accepted by the Sergeant Major of the Army. So let's go back to that confusion about, is it the Congressional Medal of Honor or is it the Medal of Honor? Where's the confusion come from? There is something called the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. That is who I work for in addition to working here at the museum. They were incorporated at first. First, it started off as the Medal of Honor Legion, Civil War veterans who came together to kind of protect the legacy of the medal. And it had a couple of different evolutions over time. 1946, they incorporated it in New York, and then in 1958, President Eisenhower signed into law the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. The word congressional is there because they were chartered by Congress. That is why the word congressional is at the beginning of the name of their organization. How do you become a member of this organization? You got to earn the Medal of Honor. There are only 65 members of this society, the living recipients of the medal. And I've been referring to their website throughout the program. It is simply Congressional Medal of Honor Society.org. A lot of the data I've presented to you today, a lot of the stories, every single citation, you can find there on that website. How do these men want their legacy? What do they want as their legacy going forward when they're no longer here? They want our nation's youth to grow up with character. So about 12 years ago now, they reached out and asked teachers to write lesson plans based on their stories. And that led to what's called the Character Development Program. And since then, these men have gone out and spoken to kids from elementary all the way on up to high school, telling their story, taking questions from the students. Here at Cantigny, we've been proud to host them several times. These photographs are taken in, this one's taken in this room, right there in that corner, with a group of students from my high school. This is a recent training for teachers. And this is an Illinois recipient, Colonel Hal Fritz, U.S. Army. We will bring recipients in to talk to teachers. We will tell teachers about the stories of the Medal of Honor. We then hope that those teachers will take those stories back to their students, and every single lesson pings on one of these core values. So again, information is there as well. This is my own little public service announcement, because this is what I do in addition to working here at the museum. So we're going to wrap up with the medal in pop culture. Did you know Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid is a Medal of Honor recipient? Earned it with the 442nd Regiment in, I believe, Italy, fictitiously. There's the movie I mentioned, Last Full Measure. Here's the only Medal of Honor recipient, actual Medal of Honor recipient up here. Audie Murphy, correct. Here is the story of the first medals that were awarded, the Great Locomotive Chase. A lot of you have either seen or heard of the movie Forrest Gump. And Forrest is a recipient of the Medal of Honor. That image, this entire scene from the movie, was taken from this actual scene from the movie. This is Sammy Davis, who is still living, lives in Indiana. Sammy's presentation at the White House was used. Tom Hanks's head was superimposed on Sammy's for some of the shots. Sammy calls himself the real Forrest Gump. There's a movie coming out in November called Devotion. It is the story of Jesse Brown, the Navy's first black aviator, who, as you can imagine, in the 1950s, had a lot of discrimination thrown his way. His wingman, Thomas Hudner, Navy pilot, didn't care what color he was, as long as he could fly, and they took care of each other. This is the story of their friendship. Jesse will get shot down over the Chosin Reservoir late 1950. Hudner will come to his aid. As he says, he's passed away since, but as he says, he did a wheels-up landing. For the non-aviation people, that is also referred to as a crash. He will crash his plane, recognizing that he will not be able to get out of there. He will crash his plane purposely to try to rescue Jesse. Unfortunately, he was not able to get him out. Hudner will be rescued, and he will receive the Medal of Honor. So this movie's coming out in November. I have high hopes for it. In Tom Clancy's novels, one of the characters, John Clark, they allude to the fact that he has earned the Medal of Honor. A couple of others here. Robert Frost, who would have known? Heaven's Gate is a loosely written about the Medal of Honor and the Medal of Honor stories. Probably some today that if you've got young kids, grandkids, The Association of the United States Army has been publishing graphic novels, what I called comic books when I was a kid. They are not printed, but they are online digitally for free. And they've printed out, I think, close to 20 of, or published close to 20 of them now. And they're just available at their website. And like I said, there is a video game series called the Medal of Honor. To their credit, they actually talked to the Medal of Honor recipients to make sure that the stories and the way they're portraying it is respectful. They actually go and talk to the members of the society about this. I hit that one nail on the head, 7:45. I was told 15 minutes of questions. Boy, am I good. So, please
Excellent.
ask questions.
So on behalf of our virtual guests, I'm going to give you a round of applause if our guests in person would like to join me. Thank you so much, Javier. To get over to our Q&A section really quickly, I just want to let our guests know who are joining us virtually online. Should you have questions for Javier this evening, please send them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. For our guests who are joining us in person, if you draw your attention to the sides of the room, you'll see my friend Audra and my friend Chris on both sides of the room. We're going to do this in person, old-fashioned style. You just got to raise your hand, and that's how we'll know. For our guests who are in person, I do want to remind you to please wait for that microphone so that our guests virtually can also hear your questions.
Who's going to be first? Gentleman right there.
My button's not working.
It's okay.
Now it's working.
Go ahead.
When the medal is awarded posthumously, how does that process work to find the
As far as the actual awarding of the medal, the ceremony,
who actually receives it?
if there is a next of kin, the next of kin, be it parents or a spouse, in the event that there is no next of kin or they can't find a next of kin, like you saw for I'm having trouble pronouncing his name. Candelario Garcia, the Sergeant Major of the Army received that medal. There was I want to say President Obama, at the end of President Obama's second term, he awarded one to a Private Henry Johnson from a New York division, African-American division, and the National Guard, because the unit was part of the New York National Guard at the time of World War I. So the Sergeant Major of the National Guard for New York accepted the medal on the behalf.
All right, I have a question from one of our online guests. We talked a little bit about Mary Edwards Walker, but have there been any other women other than Dr. Walker who have received the Medal of Honor?
There have not, and simply for the reason that up until I want to say about 8 years ago, women were not allowed to be in what the military calls the combat arms. Infantry, tanks, artillery, things of that nature. So this is a combat award. Now, we all know that since the global war on terror, there have really been no front lines. A lot of us who work for the society, I have no insight, don't go back and say Javier said, but it would not surprise me because they are going through reviews right now of valorous acts that were awarded the Silver Star or one of the service crosses, which are the levels below the Medal of Honor. And it would not surprise me at all if an American soldier, Marine, airman, sailor, female would be awarded the Medal of Honor. There are probably actions out there that warrant it. We'll see.
All right, I have another one online. I'll go ahead and take that opportunity. You had mentioned films like Devotion, The Last Full Measure, and this is a bit of a personal question, but do you have a favorite film that depicts a Medal of Honor action?
I'll start off by saying it's Hollywood, so none of them are 100% accurate. As far as the movies that I put up there, I gotta say my favorite one is probably Forrest Gump, because the actions are loosely based around the actions of Sammy Davis, and I've had the honor of working with Sammy on several occasions with the character development program and students. So that to me kind of is a personal thing. I like that story. I'm waiting to see what Devotion's like.
I'm also excited. It was a very good book. I had another guest who was wondering about the Medal of Honor Museum. Is there a Medal of Honor Museum?
There are several. The Society's official museum is aboard the USS Yorktown in Charleston, South Carolina. It is a very small part of what is a much larger aviation and Navy museum. There is a museum in Chattanooga, Tennessee, because there were a large number of medals after the Great Locomotive Chase incident. There were a lot of medals awarded for the Battle of Chickamauga, which is right there near Chattanooga. So they have the Coolidge. Mr. Coolidge just recently passed away. He was a World War II recipient. He was from the area, so they have the Coolidge Heritage Center there, which I understand is a world-class Medal of Honor museum. And most recently, there is a Medal of Honor museum being built in Arlington, Texas. It is going to be very big from what we understand. We're waiting to see if the society and the organization that's building that, a lot of the recipients are working with them. It is backed by the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, so there's a lot of money being pushed into that museum, so we have some high hopes for that one.
I do want to make sure our guests who are in person, please raise your hand if you have questions. All right, we're going to take some of our in-person questions.
I'm just going to.
Have you attended any ceremonies for recipients?
Those are very difficult tickets to come by. Even the recipients themselves are limited as to how many people they can invite. They invite several recipients to come for the ceremony. I have not. The closest I've gotten is to work with a number of them. As you can see, I've had an opportunity to work with quite a few of them. Dinners at their house, but not a formal ceremony.
All right, I believe I saw one more hand in person. All right, Chris is coming right up next to you.
Yeah, Javier, you mentioned that someone needs to be nominated 3 years after the event, and the award would be given 5 years after
Correct.
the event. And then you commented frequently that, well, this one was 20 years after the event, this one was 30 years after the event, not necessarily posthumously. Can you comment a little further on that?
Right, so in the criteria, in the rules and regulations for the Department of Defense, the recommendation has to be started within 3 years of the action. The actual award has to be done within 5 years, except if Congress sees fit to waive that. They have to actually pass a law. They have to attach it to another bill. They rarely pass a bill only for that. So they will actually attach it as a rider to another bill going through the Congress to waive that requirement. That happens often when there are reviews, like the Valor 24 from President Obama's time in office. If, for instance, we review a bunch of records from the Gulf War, or the War on Terror, and a soldier received the Distinguished Service Cross, and it's been 10 years, and now they decide, you know what, that should have been a Medal of Honor. They can approve it all the way up through the chain of command, and then Congress has to waive the 3-year requirement, 5-year requirement, and then they can award it. So that it is not rare. It happens. I won't say regularly, but it happens.
All right, I have another question from our online audience. If no living relatives of a Medal of Honor recipient are alive to accept the medal posthumously, who accepts it on behalf of the recipient, and where would that medal be kept?
So again, like I said, mentioned, if there's no living relative, typically it will be accepted by that service member's branch of service. So again, we mentioned Candelario Garcia from the Army's 1st Division, who had passed away from natural causes before his medal was awarded. The Army, the Sergeant Major of the Army, accepted that medal. As far as where the medal goes, it is typically going to be on display. The Pentagon's Hall of Heroes might be a place. That's where Dr. Walker's medal is at. The Army has a museum. They can display it there. There is a medal that went unclaimed. The sailor died Pearl Harbor attack. There was no known relatives. He died aboard the USS Utah. The state of Utah made him an honorary citizen, and the state of Utah is the custodian of that medal. It is on display in the state of Utah. So typically it's going to be someone with a connection either through service or where the person lived, where the medal will be displayed.
How many recipients actually were killed in action?
How many of these are posthumous? I can't give you an exact number. Like I had the data up there. Since World War II, over 60% of them were killed in action. So that number, I think overall it said 18% overall. Because again, the numbers from the Civil War really skew the data. 1,500 some odd awards for the Civil War with no real criteria and self-nominations being accepted. So the 18% is kind of skewed because if we take out that 1,500 soldiers from the Civil War, that posthumous percentage climbs quite a bit, most likely.
All right, I have another question from our online audience. Looking forward into the future in our current Army and military, can a drone operator or soldier who operates a remote mission receive a Medal of Honor?
That is a fantastic question, which I do not have an answer to, nor do I want to make one up for that one, at least not on record. I do not know, but you can feel free to, if there's a way, I will find out.
That is a great question. We appreciate it, and we will do our best to get you an answer.
I'll have to ask the society about that, ask our historian.
It's a great question. All right. Well, it looks like we're going to start wrapping up shortly, but I always like to end with this question, and it is a big question. So a lot of us in the audience and online, we have a lot of young people in our lives. So what lessons from the Medal of Honor can we instill in the young people in our lives? What lessons can we share with them?
That was a really softball question, Laura. Thank you for that. I would tell, if you've got grandchildren, children of your own, you know an educator in your family, you are an educator, I would encourage those people to go to the website. We have a tab at the top that says For Educators. It talks all about the 6 core values. I want you all to remember 3 C's: courage, commitment, citizenship. SIP, sacrifice, integrity, patriotism. Those are the lessons that the character development program tries to instill in young people. It's not a military thing. Character is character. It doesn't reside in uniform. It can reside in every kid, every person. So I would direct them to the website and look at the education and reach out. They can email.
And on that note, we want to say a special hello to our Illinois educators who are joining us virtually for their professional development this evening. And last but certainly not least, Javier, thank you so much. And I want to say a very special thank you. Thank you for your service and welcome home to all of our veterans who are in the audience with us tonight, both in person and virtually. If we can give all of our veterans a round of applause for me, please. Thank you so much. Thank you for your service. And again, another roaring round of applause for our friend Javier for sharing this amazing information and stories with us tonight. We thank you so much for joining us. We hope we will see you in November as we start to talk about the 80th anniversary of Operation Torch. And for our friends who are visiting us in person this evening, please don't forget at the back of the room, our friends from the American Legion are accepting donations on behalf of the Midwest Shelter for Homeless Veterans this night. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much for visiting us, and we hope to see you soon at Cantigny Park.